This is Leadership Beyond, your community of conversation.
But this is the first time in my professional career that everybody, 100% of us, are consciously aware we are engaged in the change initiative.
Yeah, everything. I mean, COVID caused us all to go through change, right? At the same time, but our experiences were so different.
Facing these unprecedented times in isolation is pure insanity. Joining us today is Damaris Patterson Price. She is the principal of Working River Leadership Consulting, a Northeast Ohio training boutique that designs and delivers learning products to grow the leadership competencies of professionals and managers. Damaris's work is the product of over 30 years serving a broad spectrum of global clients.
Her book, Unlock Your Leadership: Secrets and Straight Answers on Standing Out, Moving Up, and Getting Ahead as the Leader You Really Are, is said to be the next best thing to a personal coach. If you don't have a personal coach, this is your book. What I like about Damaris is she talks about business and leader working as one, and that showing up to serve is what makes an effective leader.
Damaris exhibits a style of being direct and telling it like it is while still helping us to hold on to the aspirational, to be and become better as we stay grounded in what is. Always a pleasure to talk to Damaris Patterson Price. Welcome, Damaris Price. Good morning, Damaris. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Tom. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. You?
Good. Very well, thank you.
I'm so excited to be here with you, Damaris. This is going to be such a fun conversation.
Good to see you.
I'd love to start by talking about the name of your consulting practice. I was reading an article where you explained a little bit about how you came to the name Working River Leadership Consulting. And if I may just quote a couple sentences to remind you, because it was an older article, you've obviously know how you came to be, but this one really jumped at me, and I'd love for you just to talk a little bit more about it.
Sure.
Working River Leadership Consulting, the name of your business, and here's what you said. This waterway was an industrious river, a working river. I looked at it and thought about leadership. An age-old attraction to leadership isn't hard to understand. Leadership is potent. It's uncomplicated and without the need of glamour. It's quiet but powerfully causing change amid the crooked twists and turns and unpredictabilities of business and organizational life.
Absolutely.
Say more about that.
I was living at the in a tower that overlooked the Cuyahoga, and I think I wrote in that same article that leadership doesn't need another metaphor, but it seemed like a great metaphor for leadership. I know that the client I was working with at the time, and this is probably my story also, the first time I got an opportunity to lead, I was initially attracted to the sexy title and the money and, getting to tell people what to do. And very quickly you learn that it's none of those things. You get quickly disabused of all of that. And so I was now in a position, having learned that, I was now in a position to help a client of mine understand that beyond the celebratory entrance into the role, that the working piece of it, the meat of leadership, is really service. It's service to your people, and it's service to your clients. And I think once a person understands that really it's not about navel gazing and genuflecting on your own greatness, but rather it's about helping people excel, climb, fly, that it's about adding value to customers, that's when you're really manifesting and becoming and embodying all of the wonderful things that attracted you to the leadership position in the first place. When you try to be those things, you'll fail. But when you do leadership, which is really doing service and creating value, that's when you shine, ironically.
Well, when you talk about the goal of leadership, the true goal, I want to focus on the word unlock from your book, unlock leadership. What keeps people who share that value from getting their value in the mix?
Certainly. Really, I think it's two things. One, I think lives administratively in organizations, and one lock lives in the person. When I was in corporate, I was in charge of brokering executive coaching, and then I ran a number of leadership programs within the organization. And one day I pulled the numbers relative to how many leaders inside of the organization were eligible to receive formal leadership development compared to those who actually did. And it ended up being some terrible number. I want to say it was like 5% or 7%. It was really, really low and criminally low. Now, I get that an organization only has so many resources, so I don't indict the organization. I think that's the world we live in. But when I said unlock, part of that unlocking was the confines that someone might find themselves in relative to just the organization they work in. There may not be the resources there. There may not be the mentoring there. There may not be formal development programs there. And so how does an individual in that situation come to realize leadership? And then I think the other piece of unlock that lives inside of the person has to do with organizationally, we're trained not to refer to ourselves as leaders unless we have a staff. And I think there's some sort of embedded message that there's ego in that or arrogance in that.
And that it's positional.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
and
hierarchical.
Yes.
And then I think women, furthermore, are discouraged from being arrogant, from being, from telling our own story, even if it's a good story to tell. And so I think that notion, that embedded almost shame is even exacerbated when it comes to women. So Unlock, it was about also giving people permission to aspire to leadership and to make leadership more accessible, which I think it is. And when I went to do the research bore out that, there's no magical genes. So it's not the great man theory, that it's doing, it's what you do. It's causing change in value, typically for the good of the system. However, just like the saying, no man, is an island, you can't do that. As smart as you are, as talented as you are, especially in a big organization, you can't cause big change, big value on your own. So you need to engage other people. But to do that, you've got to be wholly owned and self-managing and also agile and also versatile. So you've got to have mastery over this machine of self, which is as big and powerful as a Mack truck. Imagine if I don't have mastery over all of this potency. And I use that metaphor of Mack truck because we've all experienced it, where we're working, somebody walks in, the whole climate in the room changes. Birds come out, sun starts shining. They change the whole temperature. And we've also been in the room when other people come in and the place gets dark and there's thunderclouds and hellfire. And when I think about that, typically, I don't think the person realizes what an impact they're having, good or bad. Imagine if they did. Imagine what could be created if someone did understand how potent they were. So when I talk about leadership to leaders, I tell them when you walk in the room, the molecules move around, which is true, but I mean it more metaphorically that you have impact. And so what kind of impact will you have? Will you choose to have? And so unlock is really about unlocking my awareness to that, unlocking any organizational rules or norms around what leadership may or may not mean, and then unlocking any misconceptions about who should be, who could be, who can be a leader.
I resonate and reflect on so much of what you said as experiencing that, as being in leadership roles where I've walked into the room, and depending on my mindset and my mental state in that moment, it's either I'm coming in hellfire because stuff's got to get done.
Absolutely.
Or right. I mean, and just that's because that's the mindset I walk in with, or I walk in with, hey team, we've got to do this. Yeah, stuff's got to get done. We're going to do it together. Let's all roll our sleeves up. And you're right. You feel that energy change. And how does one recognize in that moment as they're walking into the room, which energy do I want to bring? Which energy is the right one for that group?
Right. And I think that that's a practiced conscientiousness, that one of the laws of the universe, cause and effect, every action equal and opposite reaction, like we learned in the 3rd grade. I think add to that the notion that a concept I learned in grad school, which was use of self. How will I use myself in this situation? Will I use my power, whatever they are, whatever my powers are, for good or for bad? And so I think part of that is being conscious of the fact that right, wrong, meaning to or accidental, you create impact. And then a decision that follows that says, I'm going to choose what kind of impact I want to create. And then that law of the universe kicks in with, well, what kind of effect do I want to have at the end of this speech, at the end of this transaction? What do I want to happen? And then what do I have to do to bring that reality to pass? I think that's a series of awakenings that have to happen. And then ultimately it's practice and choice.
Well, what is becoming clear to me as we have Damaris in the room now is the other part of your title is about straight answers. And when I heard you talk about permission to be aspirational, you went right down to the runway and said, tell the truth about what is, even the parts you don't like. And so you hold those two at the same time. We're going to go somewhere. Lead means to go before. And we better not go there in fantasy. We better start with telling the truth. So if we're impacting negatively, the first step before you change anything is to say, well, what's contributing to that? And the reason that I'm saying it this way is because I think a lot of the leaders need to create the true direct feedback first. And that's often missing, particularly among aspirational people who do, and I fall into that, they do the rah-rah first, which is great, and it's sincere, it's not disingenuous. You can do it, and you really believe it, but we don't take stock of where we are, and sometimes people need to take smaller steps before they can be as direct and powerful as Damaris. And yes, you can do it. And it begins with one conversation where you're tending to go like this and not speaking up, and then complaining my voice isn't in the mix, which is
Right.
true. But what are you doing to expand it?
Mhm.
Talk a little bit about feedback.
I think especially this piece around the kind of impact you will have. I think about Hamlet. I'm a Shakespearean nerd, so I'm gonna nerd out a little bit.
HRian
Love it.
Shakespearean.
Love it.
And that line out of Hamlet that says, "There's nothing good or bad. It's thinking that makes it so." I think it's circumstance that makes it so. To Tom's point, we are full of strength, weakness, limitation, flaws, foibles, miracles, wonder. We're full of everything under the sun. And but weaknesses applied in the wrong situation can create havoc. And what are limitations applied even accidentally in the right situation can bring some value. So added to that choice I was talking about earlier is the awareness of this world outside of myself, and how is it mixing with whatever I bring to it. To feedback, I think that in a leader's journey, especially early on, it's indicative that we fear that information. Self-deception is so comfortable and nice.
Easy to get into.
Exactly. And I want to be the smartest person in the room, and the best and the prettiest and whatever I want to be that. And I think that comes with aspiring into things I haven't yet become. However, if you got to live in the real world. And if you want to be of real service, and you realize how powerful you can be, you have to understand the parts of self, all of them, the pretty parts and the ugly parts, the strong parts and the weak parts. I think it's people that, again, fall into that leadership is sexy, leadership is glamour, leadership means more money, leadership means more power. I think people who subscribe to those notions are likely the ones that cling to that self-deception. If you want to add real value, I think you have to look yourself in the mirror and understand what parts of yourself are capable of what. It's like I'm thinking of Gulliver's Travels and the Lilliputians, right? We're all Gullivers, right? And our clients or our employees are the Lilliputians. Do you want to bring harm there, or do you want to do good there? And if you want to do good, it means you have to be careful with yourself. It means you've got to be conscientious about yourself. You've got to be aware of how you're impacting the environment or not. And if you want to bring value, you've got to be aware.
And to do that, you need other eyes and other
You need data.
voices. Very hard to do it
Data.
looking in the mirror.
You need data. Mm-hmm.
And I think about early career, where this is graduation season, right? So we've got our college graduates who are hopefully finding jobs and that excite them, and they're coming into their first, full-time job for the thing that they studied. And I think back to when I walked into the room and I had all these notions of, I'm in Chicago, and so I was gonna make it when I walked down those city streets in my jacket with my briefcase, and I'm going to walk in and I've made it, right? Like I'm there. And then you get there and you go, oh, I'm afraid to say anything because these are older, wiser people in this room, are much smarter than me. They must be, because they've definitely been doing this longer. And so how would you advise our younger, just entering the career force listeners to bring that confidence. I mean, they've studied, they learned the thing, right? Like they have value and perspective that, let's face it, the older leaders don't have that same perspective.
True.
Right? They don't.
Very
right?
true.
Because they're bringing along their 20, 30, 40, whatever years of experience that has shaped their mindset. And you need that new, fresh mindset of, hey, this is what's going on from my lens. How would you advise someone to just like build up that confidence to be able to go into the room new and show their value, feel comfortable showing their value?
And see, I was on the opposite. I was full of hubris, right? I had my briefcase and my little power suit, right? And I was, ready to be CEO at like 21 years old. Right? I think whether it's hubris or insecurity, my mom had a lot of axioms, and that's why I kind of think in these axioms. And so the one that's coming to my mind now is the wise man knows he knows nothing at all. Right. And so it took me a long time to actually understand what that means, that I needed to, it's okay to know that you're smart. It's okay to know that you've got gifts, but it's also indicative of leadership maturity to learn, to be a lifelong learner, which means you've got to be quiet, right? And you've got to be observant, and you have to walk in with humility. And here are these people that have been here exponentially longer than you have. And they've survived something, and they've been through things that you haven't even imagined. You don't even know what you don't know. And so to learn from them, learn the language, learn the mores, learn the rituals, learn those things that are the nuances, the things that aren't written in any handbook. And in learning about them, you begin to mimic, you begin to emulate, you begin to walk and talk like they do. And also, I think, respect their journey. Hubris, I only respect my own journey, which is like this long. But when I have that learner's attitude, I can come to respect other people's journey and learn from them without having to traverse the same hills and valleys. On the other end, for the young person who's walking in with, insecure or shy, I would say learn. And I would also say fall in love. And here's what I mean by that. Find out or figure out what is that thing you love. And I'm not talking about infatuation love. I'm talking about true love. What do I mean? Love as in will pay the price to stay good at it. Love as in will become a student of it. Love as in want to be the very best you can at this, and you find people who are better than you, and you're like a sponge. You just grab up whatever you can find about that thing. For me, the thing I fell in love with was training and leadership development. So for the shy person, I would say fall in love and become a student of that thing, absorb it. Then secondarily, don't walk in as expert, but rather, again, walk in as servant. When I walk in an expert, I find that people get stage fright. They get performance anxiety because now I'm in front of the room and I've got to talk like I know what I'm doing.
And imposter syndrome.
Exactly. Yeah. Versus if I become a student and then I walk in to serve, I'm no longer navel gazing. And I'm really there to help someone and create value. And ironically, again, I find that when I take my mind off of what I'm trying to be versus serve in my specialty or serve in my discipline or whatever it is that I've fallen in love with, that I manifest the thing I was trying to be in the first place.
Yeah.
And so that's what
And
I
it's
would
really
say.
the how can I help, right? Always thinking, how can I help?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Damaris, how has your extensive work in DEI informed your perception, not just about, well, put it in your words, the doing of leadership in changing environments?
I think that they are two sides of the same coin. There can't be one without the other. From how we define leadership to how we think leadership might look and walk and talk has to become more varied to accept more manifestations of what it could look like. And then I think if I'm a leader, knowing that my audiences, my clients, my employees are going to run the range and likely be unlike me, how do I engage them despite this gulf in culture or language or whatever it is? And so from an administrative organizational standpoint, the work I do around DEI is really in service of expanding what leadership looks like. There's still the white male model of leadership when you have 65% of public office holders are white men and 95% of Fortune 500 CEOs are white men. Now, there's nothing wrong with white men. We need white men around the table.
How kind. I can't help it. I resemble that.
However, talent doesn't exclusively reside in him, right? And so I like that other axiom that says, talent's equally distributed, but opportunity isn't. And so there is a lot of talent in a lot of communities that's going untapped, that's going unmentored, that's going undeveloped. So from an administrative organizational standpoint, part of my work is about how do we bring that talent into your company, not because it's the nice thing to do to bring these downtrodden, minority. That's not what it's about. It's because these people are smart.
We want the talent.
We're missing
in the mix.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're missing
They're
this.
smart, and they can create wealth for you.
Amen.
So my DEI work tends to be very business oriented. I was born and raised in corporate banking. And so you can't get more corporate than banking. And so I come at it from that wealth creating standpoint. And then again, from a leadership standpoint, most of the people I need to influence are nothing like me. Nothing like me. Our lived experiences aren't alike. And so how do I engage these people that are so unlike me? And because unless I do that, I'll fail. I'll fail. And part of engagement, which I love the usual questions that we use to test for engagement, but I think it's silent on one important piece, and that's inclusion and belonging. And especially for employees that come from marginalized communities, if I don't feel belonging, if I don't feel like I can have place and purpose in your organization, in this skin, in this body, serving this God or deity or higher power or whatever my diversities are, if I don't feel like I can be whole, I'm not going to be engaged.
And that's locking it in.
Yeah.
Using the title of the book, and we want to unlock it. As a bridge. Well, the time goes by very quickly, and we might need a part 2, but we did a series which isn't complete. And since you used the term, and I haven't seen it written that way, HRian, is that something you coined, or is that a thing? I haven't seen it.
It's the way I think about and what I call us, those people that have worked in HR.
Well, here's the question.
Yes, sir.
which is, what would you say to fellow HRians about reinventing HR?
Mm.
What needs to happen?
HR needs to become a consultancy, not an order taking, Roddy. And what that means is that HRians need to go into the businesses that they serve and learn about the business, not about, about HR, right? Go into the business and learn about the widgets that they make and learn what keeps that business owner or that line of business senior leader up at night. And then in true consultancy manner, how do I solve business problems through an HRian's lens? Not how do I install HR into business? That's not the question. The question is, how do I solve business problems through an HRian lens?
I love that.
And what would you say to aligning the business strategy and the people strategy?
Again, same thing. HRians know their stuff. That's not what you have to learn. You have to learn how to become a business person. And then again, how do you solve business problem through talent, through employee engagement, through retention, through growth programs? So it's a matter of applying our specialized collection of solutions to their problems, but you got to know what their problems are, which is why you got to become a student of your business, the business that you're serving.
And say it in a way that they will understand.
Exactly.
That
You're not going to be
when you'll get their attention.
Exactly. Well,
right?
Again, it goes back to that
service.
understand.
Yeah.
It goes back to serving. You're not there to be expert. You're there to serve. Here's my little thing on value. I usually say value lives in pain. That sounds kinky, but it's not.
Value I wouldn't have gone there without the nudge.
Value lives in my ability to solve pain, right? I'm a consultant, you're my client. My value lives in my ability to solve your pain or to accelerate your contact with an advantage. In an organization, I'm the HRBP. My value lives in my ability to go into my line of business and solve their pain. I've got to understand their business to understand their pain.
Right.
So that's the heart of consultancy.
I think so much of that too is like, it's not just how does HR find a way to engage with the business, but there's the other side, right? How business has to also be willing to open the door and let us sit down.
And they'll be willing to do that if we sounded more like them. If we, I do diversity work. And so I talk about cultural competency. If HR was culturally competent in business, we'd get the seat at the table more expeditiously.
Yeah.
They would hear us sooner and more deeply if we can demonstrate we understand them.
If you're addressing what they care most about in a language they can understand, whether it's your first language or not.
That's cultural competency, yes.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Damaris.
Happily. I've had so much fun.
We can't be done. There needs to be a part 2.
I vote for a part 2. We'll work that out.
I'm in.
Thank you for joining us.
Happily.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Beyond podcast. We hope you benefited from this conversation as much as we have. We invite you to join our community of conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to sign up at aleadershipbeyond.com for free materials and updates. That's aleadershipbeyond.com. Join us in 2 weeks for our next episode.